You're listening to Remotely We Are One, a podcast to help inspire others to take their lives back from the office commute. I'm Rick, a passionate beer rep who loves the industry but hates the commute.
And I'm Kaleem, a remote work advocate and consultant. We're going to speak with some of the top professionals who have managed to avoid the commute as they share stories from the most inspiring to the most comical, all while working remotely.
Man, this sounds exciting. Let's clock in.
First off, man, thank you so much, bro. I mean, Josh, just so you understand, the first time we had him scheduled, I had to speak in San Francisco. And I was like, sweet, I'll be done. You know, like the event was like scheduled at this one time. I'm like, yeah, I got plenty of time. And they were like, oh, well, we made a mistake. We're sorry. And I was like, well, mistake for what? And they're like, oh, this event's going to go longer. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll make it back to my hotel. And sure enough, I didn't. So I called him. I'm like, I'm so embarrassed, but I can't do it. I'm in San Francisco. And you were actually in San Francisco too, right? I didn't even put two and two together.
Yeah, I was like just, a handful of blocks away from that quick chat we had there in the video.
Damn, if I was on point, we could have met in person and it would have been way cooler. It would have been way cooler.
Welcome back to Remotely We Are One. I am your guest co-host, Josh Morse, joined by my esteemed colleague, Kaleem Clarkson.
What's up, Morris? What's up, baby?
Great to be here. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Since you know how to find us now, do us a huge favor. Go to ratethispodcast.com/remotely1. Leave us a review. Again, ratethispodcast.com/remotely1. If you could do that for us, we'd be ever so thankful.
Thank you.
Since 2015, Remotely One has been the largest community of remote work professionals with over 2,500 Slack members and 4,000 email subscribers.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's free to join, so go check it out at remotely.com. And with that, I will introduce Kaleem, and he'll introduce our today's guest.
Good job, Mr. Morris. I mean, I appreciate you, man, coming on, being our wow, you might be our second guest host from the 207. Thank you, man.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so today's guest, again, nervous as usual. I get nervous with our guests. Today's guests, not only do they have perfect hair, they love Seinfeld. So, we kicked it off on the right foot. Our guest today, born in Norway, he studied economics, computer science. He currently resides in San Francisco. Morris, check this out. You ready?
I'm ready.
He was a sniper in the Norwegian army. Yeah, bro. Yeah.
I'm guessing that's the first sniper from the Norwegian army you've had on your show.
Seriously. And not only that, when he said it, I looked out my window right away. Just like, oh shit. Oh shit. He doesn't shoot too much anymore, but now he has a bow and arrow. So watch out, everybody. Watch out. He's got a bow and arrow. He's got a good shot. He once sailed across the North Sea in a storm. So we need to hear that a little bit before we get into some serious stuff. We need to hear what that storm was like. He has founded a couple of companies, and both of them have been YC companies. That's Combinator. What's the first word? It's not Y Combinator. There we go. It's Y Combinator, if you didn't know, in 2016 and in 2018. His current company is fully remote, and they've raised over $43 million in investments. So we're going to have to talk about what it's like raising funding. I think we'd be our second or third guest who's raised money being a fully remote company. So we're going to have to ask a little bit more about that. Last but not least, he is the co-founder and CEO of Safety Wing, which is a health insurance company for remote workers and teams. Listeners, viewers, give a warm welcome to Sondre Rasch. Thank you, Sondre. Welcome.
Thank you. What an intro. That was a high energy intro. I feel introduced.
I mean, I hope so, sir. You are an esteemed guest. Thank you so much. All you out there, we've had so many funny stories of trying to schedule this busy person. Mainly my fault, but we finally got him. I'm so thankful for you being here, man. Good shit.
Before we get into it, I want to explain like why that energy is the way it is, Sondre. Kaleem was a hype man for like every good concert
Let's go
in the city of Worcester. So like people are like, why is he so excited? I'm like, because he had to be excited for like the last 30 years to get other people excited. So it's funny that you pointed that out, but I've known him for so long that he's the ultimate hype man. He really is.
Sondre, if I had a huge clock and huge glasses, I could pull the Public Enemy Flavor Flav. Yeah, boy, I'll just get everybody amped up. But for real. I'll kick it off, Morris. So before Morris asked his work question, what was up with you sailing across the North Sea? What happened? And were you the captain? Was everyone looking for you to save him? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, so I did. This is long ago. It was during college. We were 5 friends, and a couple of people had kind of like, they'd said they'd been sailing a lot, but turns out they'd just been sailing like when you're like a kid in like a single boat. And we rented a boat, and a couple of these people are now in politics, a couple in business. It was a nice crew. And we ventured out to go sail across the North Sea to Shetland from Bergen on the west coast of Norway. And, started out, it was sunny. We played music. We had, our kind of shrimps or whatever with us and beers. We're having a good time.
Nice.
One of the ladies, she got seasick like just an hour out and was just like throwing out the rest of the trip. But anyway, it started getting more and more wind, and the waves were big, but it was nice. Like we were flying through those waves, high speeds, and it was amazing. And then just as we're arriving to Shetland, then the wind starts to get a bit bad. So this is like the second night. So we've been sailing for like a couple of days, let's say.
Wow. And you said this is early college, so you're young.
Yeah, like
wow.
20. Yeah.
Wow.
21. So the weather's getting really bad, and it's shifty, and waves are kind of hitting over the boat. And we're trying to get the sail down to kind of go on engine into the harbor. But the wind shifts. So, and by the way, when the wind shifts, it fills up the sail, so you can't pull it down. And when the sail is up and the wind is really heavy, it's dangerous. So we're trying, and time is going by. And by the way, as this is happening, 300 meters away from us, we can see this like huge cliffs. And like these enormous waves are hitting the cliffs because we're close to the harbor. And so as we're trying to pull this down, it just won't come down. And then we also had this little kind of kerfuffle there where, one person didn't want to use the west. We had this little like personal conflict right in the middle of this. Eventually we get where we had to like throw him in and lock him into the door. It was crazy. And eventually we get it down, and we're going over to this like console, which is outdoor, like in the middle of the sailboat. And I tried to like press the button to start the engine, and my finger just goes straight through the button.
Oh my gosh.
All the seawater that is kind of all the waves going over the boat has dissolved the glue on the console. So it just fell right through. And we have to get down in, and at this point, these like cliffs are getting terrifyingly close. And I'm in the engine, kind of trying to find this like piece to the button. I bring them back, try to put them together. It doesn't work. And now we have to act fast. So it's too late to like call for help. Like we're going to be hit the rocks before it happens. So Peter, who is now actually like the justice spokesman at the government of Norway, he came up with this idea that we kind of, can't you just take like the red and the green cable and like put them together?
So you just pulled some gangster shit and you hotwired it? Is that what I hear you tell me?
That's exactly what we did. We screwed open the console with this thing we put together. We found the red and the green, and we hotwired the boat. And indeed, it did start, and we went ashore, and we were saved.
Wow!
Holy shit!
It sounds like you were prepared at an early age for venture capital funding for startups. I mean, like all the analogies you could draw from like all the problems you had on the sailboat to like running a startup, you were good, man. You were like this. They should put everyone in this scenario in startup like early on, and like if you can handle it and put the red and the green wire together, okay, we're gonna give you the money.
I could see Sondre tipping a table over in a meeting. What do you mean we haven't hit our numbers yet? I've been in a storm and almost died. He tips a table over. He's like, you don't know shit. You know what I mean? Oh my gosh.
That's good.
The funniest part to me is that, now, did you say the Norway prime minister knew how to hotwire some shit? Like, to me, that's the funniest part of the story. He's like, hey, hold on. Let's hotwire this thing. And now he's like...
Yeah, he's even more. He's like the justice spokesperson. So it's like justice. It's like it's funny.
There's a joke in there somewhere. It's like a politician, a startup CEO, and like
Right.
some other people. Like we're on a boat, like, and then the joke goes from there. But no,
Right.
it's
And then he jumped over the part. Unless I heard that correctly, did you just quickly jump over the part where you had to lock somebody below deck because they were getting a little too rowdy? Like, you're going into lockdown.
Yeah. I mean, people react in a crisis or something, but the conflict was this person, when the sunny weather was fine, it was like, wear a vest, whatever, or you're supposed to, like, when you walk around, you wear a vest and you hook yourself. But at this point, it's nighttime, it's pouring down, there's storm, and waves are going over. So it's like, if someone falls out, we're not going to be able to find you.
Right? Yeah. So
like,
it's for his own safety.
Yeah, for his own safety. But he was just like, no, I don't need that.
Have you ever thought about like, I know how, people look at the American Film Society and they're like, wow, that's a great film. And then they'll take it back to their country and they'll be like, I need to get a version of whatever that is. I feel like this is the Norwegian version of like The Perfect Storm. You could like star in that, produce it. Like that's a great story, man.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It is a great story. Well done.
We had to tell him, like, you got to put on his safety gear or you can't be up here. And he was like, oh, he didn't, like, kind of like, he refused multiple times. Eventually, we just like to take one in each arm. We didn't have time in a way to quarrel because.
Right.
So we just like pulled him down, locked the door and said, okay, let's save this boat now.
And then he became the president of the United States, Barack Obama. I mean, who would think Barack wouldn't be following the rules back then? What a crazy story. Crazy stuff. Oh, good stuff. Well, thank you for kicking it off, man. Josh, go for it. I'm sorry I derailed, but like that story was just, hearing that is just interesting as hell.
No, I'm curious, like after, it's interesting like to hear to somebody's background and what they did before becoming, because I know so many CEO and startup people through the 12 years I've been in that arena. Like, what was the spark that made you move from those things you did in your past to becoming a startup CEO? Like, what was your motivation?
Yeah. I was interested in startup stuff when I was a teenager early on. I was on the computers in my room and I was just interested in entrepreneur stuff, really early. I just found that interesting. And so I had this little experiment as a teenager, 14, 15, where I tried to like host websites for people on the server in my room. And and I learned a lot from that. And I did that even with a couple of people I met online. One was in Romania and the other was in Holland. And we cooperated in something called IRC, which is kind of like Slack. I think it is Slack, actually.
Yeah.
IRC.
You remember it.
Yeah.
That's a good days. So yes, I had early interest, early taste of it. And in a way, this whole thing with the army and policy work, that was in a way a detour. I was like longing to get back to, tinkering, entrepreneurship online. That's what I really find fun and interesting.
Yeah. So your first experience was with a company that you founded called Superside, and that got into Y Combinator. I'm just curious, how did you even learn about, did you come over to the States and, what was Superside about? And then like, how did you first get exposed to Y Combinator?
I first got exposed to Y Combinator really early, like 2007, 8. I started following Picked it up. I'm not sure exactly how I came across it, but
Mhm,
immediately I just like loved the vibe of the whole thing. And I still do for the same reason. It's like the most bullshit-free zone maybe I've come across. Like, but also
mhm.
just like people who really mean well and trying to figure stuff out. And I really find it, as well as the entrepreneurship thing. So yeah, and then I was following Hacker News since then. So I came across it somehow, immediately resonated with the vibe and paid attention to it since.
Interesting. So moving on to kind of safety wing, what was it specifically like? Because a lot of YC companies are tech products or SaaS products. Generally speaking, I know it's a huge generalization, but to provide health insurance
Right.
just doesn't feel like a YC company. Tell me if I'm wrong here, but what even made you think of Safety Wing, of providing insurance? Number one, what gave you the idea? And then two, how did you pitch it to YC to be part of that project when most things were SaaS companies at the time?
Yeah. So the way I came up with the idea is in my first company, freelancer platform, we wanted to provide benefits for the freelancers on the platform.
There we go.
We offered it, and eventually we went to build it ourselves. So that's the discovery of the idea. Well, I mean, it is true. There is, mostly software and there's a lot, but there is actually a lot of other stuff there as well. Quite a
Okay.
bit of hardware. And I think one way to just read it is that there was a while where almost all the like innovation happened in software. But I do believe this like phrase Mark Andreessen said, like software eating the world. First like the software stuff was made, and then it's like software, and internet turned its kind of gaze on, other industries. And insurance is just one of the holdouts. So many other places, the internet and software arrived decades ago. And there was a huge disruption and transformation of industries like, I don't know, media or a lot of enterprise stuff. But it's really coming now to insurance. And insurance does lend itself to software perfectly. There's customer service component, but a lot of there's a regulatory component, but a lot of the basics, what is insurance? It's a promise.
In case some shit happens, is what I call it.
Some shit happens. But, there's a lot of rules. It's like this thing happens with these conditions, and then there's a payout. And the user experience often isn't as good. So I think that just taking a lot of those like Silicon Valley lessons on making great user experience, make a product people love, and using software and the internet to bring this product to this new market, which is remote work, remote teams, I think it was a perfect fit, actually.
You use a good term. The insurance industry, and I know this all too well, is slowly moving towards digitization and the ability to buy online like you would buy products and services in other industries. Did you find that the pandemic created an urgency for a product like this just based on, the marketplace being digital and more freelancers also coming online just during the pandemic because more people started businesses during COVID than that's ever been started before? I saw that on my side of the industry, on the commercial insurance side. I just wondered your impressions of like how the pandemic affected your business and, remote work during that and all those things.
Yeah, yeah, it totally did. I'm going to try to skip around a story I want to tell later now, but a couple of months before the pandemic hit, I remember we had this like meeting where somebody asked, "What's the biggest threat to SafeDoing?" And co-founder Hans was like, "Well, that'll have to be a global pandemic," because we had health, but also travel medical insurance, and customers were digital nomads all around the world.
Oh, right. Sondre, just to
Yeah,
back up a little bit, was your original model based mostly focused on, because just to give a timeline, you co-founded Safety Wing in roughly 2018-ish,
yeah.
2017, 18-ish. So it's definitely before the pandemic. So like, was it more about digital nomads first? Like more about the traveling insurance first?
Yeah, exactly. We started out, the question was, how can we make global social safety net? We knew travel medical was already global. Could we make a travel medical that you could just have anywhere in the world on a subscription forever? Kind of yes. And we started out to individuals, people who live abroad but work remotely. And that became Nomad Insurance. And it was in
Ah,
2020 that the kind of Teams product, which it's now our flagship, went live. And it actually was launched on March 3rd, 2020, right before the kind of COVID really ranked up. Yeah, that hit. We had just launched this other product, but we had all these like moral dilemmas in that period as well. I remember one thing, for example, that I was really happy about in retrospect was that we covered evacuation when this US agency put travel warning level 4 on a country. And what happened during that time was that this agency put travel warning level 4 on the whole world, which meant that each one of our customers had the right to evacuate with us paying for it, right? That was covered. And
oh my gosh. It took me a second to catch up. Now I see what you're saying.
And if they were to do that, two things would happen. So one, that would be very expensive. And two, they would no longer be our customer. So it's such an existential thing. And okay, so here's the moral dilemma. Nobody knew about that, right? Because people don't like know every detail of what's covered. And this is like an unusual thing that we had this like particular version of political evacuation, as it was called, which meant that we had a dilemma, which was, should we tell our users about this? Because it was also timing out. It was like 14 days from the time. Thankfully, we had some conversations about it and we decided it's the right thing to do. Let's just tell them and then, we'll just live with whatever happens. And so we sent out, and we not even sent out, we sent out like 2 weeks till the time's out, 1 week, 3 days. I was on overnight on customer service, several times during these days. And a third of our customers did evacuate, and we lost them. So our graph looks like a third.
Yep.
All during that time. It was really, really, really bad. But it had a good ending to the story, because a few months later, a lot of people were mentioning they really appreciated how we communicated and stuff, and that we were available to evacuate. Obviously, people who were evacuated were super happy. So already in August, when we introduced this like COVID coverage, we started growing a lot.
Yeah.
20 of the top 40 ambassadors of the kind of biggest competitor at the time switched to us. And we grew 3x while the market was flat from August to December.
Wow.
So it actually was a really happy ending.
That's huge.
Kudos to you.
Yeah, I mean,
Damn.
I could see where that's so, I mean, I'm sure it's a crucial decision. You made the right decision, but it's also like people so many times don't really value insurance because like you guys both said before we started getting into your story, it's a product that people don't understand until a claim actually happens. Like,
oh yeah.
And it's usually sold through fear. And that fear isn't real until something like what you just went through actually happened. And people then are like, wow, claims could happen to me. And by the way, other forms of COVID and pandemics and all those things are now real in the world. So like you paying on claims like that, having a product that supports those events, it doesn't surprise me at all that people are like, wow, they pay their claims. Like that's a reputable company and we should buy that product for sure. So kudos to you, man. That's an awesome
crazy story because you're way better than I am, bro. I wouldn't have told nobody shit. I'd have been like, I'm keeping that to myself. I mean, I feel like I'm a good human being, right? But the fact that you and listeners, viewers, when you talk about creating mission statements and you talk about creating values for your company, this is literally the prime example of why you need to do that. Like when you have a decision that's questioning the goodness in you and you're just really struggling, these things help. And the fact that you knew that if you did this, it could potentially, I don't want to say it could have ruined your business completely, but potentially if everybody took a claim, but doing good can work out. So it's a great story, man. Kudos to you and your team for making that decision. I can't even say that enough. So do your values, do your missions. That shit's real because when you have difficult decisions, you need a roadmap. Damn it.
Reminds me of like the Southwest story of like when they went back and forth about starting to charge for bags. They went through this whole moral dilemma of like, okay, we could increase revenues by $3 million if we started doing bag fees. And like they decided not to do it. You just made the same kind of choice that CEO made. It's really good. It's awesome. Yeah. It's refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, I should say it was actually mostly pushed on by some other people in the company, particular CTO, Sarah. But thankfully, we have a lot of people in the company who, we have a bit of an idealistic streak, but it was great, like you said, to get that moment of testing. Do we really mean it? And then having it, turn out so well, even though it was, of course, very scary and painful for a little while.
Did you have to lock anyone in the basement like you did on the boat? Or
that's the great thing about remote work. Yeah.
That's great. Well done. Holy shit. Yeah, I forgot to tell everybody that, I locked all the other VPs in the basement and then we made the call.
Yeah, great. The VP, the head of finance was.
I can imagine. Wow. Yeah. CFO, head of finance, just must have been sweating bullets for sure. So on to remote work. So, Sondre, what was it? Was it like you created a whole business based around remote work? How do you feel about the state of remote work before the pandemic? What were your thoughts? And now what do you think?
Yeah, I haven't changed. Both of my companies were built fully remote, right? And kind of depended on that in some sense. I've been all in remote work for a long time. And I basically am confident that in the future, almost anything that can be remote will be remote. What the pandemic did was accelerate how fast I thought that would happen. So before, I remember exactly what I thought, because we said it on that day, the March 3rd, when we launched health insurance for remote teams. We had our team for then like 12 people. Now it's 192 here in San Francisco.
Well done. 12 to 192?
Yeah.
Wow.
And we had a launch event here in San Francisco. And somebody said from the stage, in 10 years, most companies will be remote. And then next weekend, all companies were remote.
Wow.
So that was, dramatic. And we had problem getting people home. And of course, a lot of people switched to working remotely during that time. And we accelerated, my guess is we accelerated like 5 years. Where, before the pandemic, it was like 3% of the workforce. At the peak during the pandemic, it was like 30 to 50%. And then it fell down, but it didn't fall down to 3%. We thought it would fall down to 15. Actually, I haven't fell down that much even yet. And a lot of people have also tried remote work. I just saw this stat we posted on Twitter yesterday that, actually I heard an even more new one, which was this LinkedIn CEO said that 14% of the jobs they had on their platform was remote. But 50% of the job candidates or applications were to those jobs.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. Another one is Hacker News job posts. That went up to 80% of job posts being remote during the pandemic. It hasn't fallen down yet. So in startup land, it's all remote, or it's almost all, like over 80%. So yeah, I was basically convinced beforehand, and the entire company is built on that being true and having like enormous repercussions throughout the economy. But and what I believe after the pandemic is the same, but sooner.
What about culture? Like when you're building a new company and like you're doing it remote, you've done it twice now. Kaleem and I talk about this all the time. In the insurance industry, for example, like people built their careers and their culture around the water cooler. I grew up in an environment where it was an insurance company. People used to play foosball and, have a beer down near the company cafeteria. And that was like how you built a culture, because people learned how to work, built their careers, made friendships, advanced their careers, or made bad mistakes and did advance their careers by drinking too many beers by the cafeteria. So like, how did you come up with how you wanted to build a culture at your company?
Yeah. I came out of first company totally changing my mind on this. I sort of thought like values and vision was corporate BS, but I was wrong. I think it can be, but if it is sincere, it's like the only thing almost that fully scales.
Interesting.
And if you don't define it yourself, your culture can go sideways real fast. I think the cornerstones of a good culture is a vision worth reaching and values that are coherent and worth following, and kind of produce some culture that is good, and applying that, how you hire and give feedback to each other, and, like through the whole life cycle. And once you have that, then you have this like culture that people can understand, and it becomes even more important in a remote company, because in a regular company, you can kind of just opt into the culture of your city. If you're working in a city, everyone there is going to know like that city's culture, and it's like you could build your company on top of that city's culture. But if you're remote, people are going to be from all over the place, so you have to build the platform. Their shared platform is even more important. Safe Doing is 192 people from 70 different countries. So that's one thing I think about culture. And how do we do it? One great thing I think people really underestimate about remote, they didn't used to do this, but people have forgotten about it a little bit, is that remote collaboration gets better like software, but like in-person collaboration doesn't that much, very little. So if you think about like working together is today great, but that was also great 50 years ago before the computer. Working together, remotely, that was dramatically different 10 years ago. And again, dramatically different 10 years before that. And 10 years before that, it wasn't even a thing. So it's like this curve where tools are being figured out, like practices, how to run a company, how to, make it engaging, compelling, is going exponential. And I think in 10 years, it will be dramatically much better. And what are some of those things we love and use? We use kind of virtual office software. We use TeamFlow, where you kind of work around in this 2D space. So you can have, serendipitous meetings. We use a lot of small groups with that software. For example, when we have Monday meetings, everyone goes into groups of 3, and there's like a prompt question. And that's one way that you get that sense of serendipity. But they also should add that there is a place to play for meeting in person still. With remote work, that time can be really impactful. So we do team gatherings like 3 to 4 times a year. So last time, a month ago, we flew everyone to Bali, Indonesia.
Well done.
That's so cool.
Did you film it?
Yeah, we did actually. We did film a lot of it. It's amazing. And everyone loves, because we really figured out this like culture people thing. Everyone absolutely love it. It's just so nice to meet everyone. And we've had this person, Samantha Liberty, who organizes these for us, and it's absolutely incredible. So they do a lot in terms of building that cohesion as well. And then we can return to the virtual after.
Makes total sense. So I kind of have a question as far as like where we're seeing this divide right now, and where you feel like, you as a founder of a remote first company can kind of speak to. Right now, we're seeing a lot of forced return to the office. And I often say that the definition of hybrid has changed dramatically just over the past 18 months, because before the pandemic, if you were to ask, hey, what do you think a hybrid company is? Someone would say, oh yeah, a whole bunch of people that work remotely and then people go to the office, or maybe choice. And now we're seeing a lot of times people saying, well, come into the office 4 days a week. We're a hybrid company. I just disagree so badly about that. Where are you seeing this divide between employees, what they want, individual contributors, and leadership? And where do you think that this is going to how do you think that this is going to play out? Because you're in San Francisco, right? So you're in San Francisco, probably one of the biggest cities hit by this remote work space, where now the city has to probably rethink, what does coming into town mean now? What is the downtown? What is the purpose of the downtown city now that everyone's just not coming into the office? Where do you think that this whole thing is going to end? Because obviously these two are not on the same path at all, when you talk about leadership and individual contributors. So what's your thought on this forced return to office, and where do you see it going?
Yeah. No, it is fun to see. So one thing that, is worth just remembering is that this is like wave number 4th of this post-pandemic. And
right.
And the first one was already back in like late 2020, and it was like 2 in 20. So it's the first time. And the comical thing, and the kind of like the only break with expectation. So if you remember, like when we draw out this line, when the pandemic happened. I think nobody expected it to like stay at remote at peak pandemic lockdown, obviously, right?
No.
But now people are like saying that as like some evidence that remote work is a fad. I'm like, are you crazy? Like, obviously, it wouldn't stay at peak lockdown. The weird thing is, of course, how difficult it has been for these companies who do not like want to stay remote, and they have been for them to go back, right? Instead of them just obviously going back right after pandemic, so many of them like went back and then they retracted it, and then and even the people who went all in on it, let's say the recent example, I know someone who works there, like Twitter, they also still have like most of the people remote,
Right.
because you gonna, and the reason, and Amazon also went similarly hard on it, but they are similarly a lot of it remote. And the reason is, of course, you can't get the toothpaste back in the tube. So all of these companies had the same experience, which is that during pandemic, like 30%, we've seen the stats, multiple companies, 30% moved during the pandemic years. Okay, so now a third of your company works somewhere else. And it's not like, oh, that's automatically the 30% you want to let go of, right? It might be, some of those might be your best executive, right? Or your best programmer or your key lawyer, right? And then the other thing that happened is that a lot of people hired during that time with location remote. So many companies found like half their companies living away, and it's not easy to just call people back. So how I see this playing out, so that's why they're all struggling, and why this goes in waves instead of just being something that happened in 2021 and then was done with, is because they're unsuccessful. But of course, a lot of companies aren't trying this, right? A lot of companies during this time went the other way and have some kind of permanent remote first setup, which is more common actually. But you're not going to hear about them because they're not the one kind of resisting their way of working that hard. How is it going to play out? Well, some of these companies are going to go back to the office. Some of them will, maybe during this time, maybe they will do that thing where they just like, if they're struggling, they might let go of the half of their companies who isn't remote. But of course, they're going to pay for that. They might indeed have to then let go of their top programmers and their top lawyer and two of their top executives.
Right.
And where are they going to apply? Well, that's back to the LinkedIn data. 14% of your jobs, 50% of the applicants. This is a story. So what you're seeing there is, it's like the war for talent, and like one side has a machine gun and the other side has bow and arrow.
Well done, Sondre.
Yeah, it's going to be a wipeout, but it's a battle that's going to take a few years. But the market signals are crystal clear. The in-person side is going to lose, because having a global labor market allows you to get talent from anywhere in the world, and that's an economic benefit. So that's how I think this will, play out over a while. Some companies will be able to go back eventually through some great sacrifices of their own productivity and talent. It will, but it's not like that's over 50% or anything. This is the holdouts who have been trying to go back for 2 years and somehow are still unsuccessful.
Interesting.
I think it's interesting that, just keep to insurance really quickly. I look at a lot of hiring data in that because our product is focused around that, but it's the average age in insurance, and this is across healthcare, personal lines, all those things. The average age of an employee is 62 in the insurance industry. Think about like replacing the workforce. And when you replace a workforce, the people that are coming online to do these jobs now, they're people that want to be remote. So it just goes more to, your point, Sondre, around the data and like the way it needs to go and the pain you would have to go into to try and get people actually back to the office right now. It just doesn't make sense. We shouldn't fight it. We should fight actually the other way to try to impose more tools to make remote work more enjoyable, which is kind of your point before that. So it's great.
Totally.
Now the most important question, sir. The question that we all been waiting for. It's my favorite part of the show.
Yeah. So tell us about a comical or inspiring moment you've had so far in your career, and working remotely. Yeah. I think you said you wanted to come back, avoid this story, and then come back to it. So.
Yeah, but I didn't fully. Yeah, I mean, sorry, I just have to, tell the rest of that, story that I basically spoiled earlier. But it was when we launched health insurance for remote teams.
Okay.
So to fill in the rest of that, we had a remote team of 12. We've been working for 2 years. To launch it, we flew around to San Francisco. We had this, confetti on the roof.
Nice.
Fantastic day. We had a launch party in this co-working space, Parisoma, in San Francisco later that day. I think about 200 founders showed up. We had a couple of remote work people there. Andreas Klinger was there. Dan Murph was there. And,
cool.
We said from the stage, in 10 years, most companies will be remote. Next weekend, all companies were remote. The co-working space we were in, they had to shut down. We struggled to get anyone of our team back. So we ended up, forced in person for a little while because they were literally impossible to travel back. But, of course, it ended up being the best thing that ever happened. That product grew like 100% a month the following months. It was amazing product market fit, grew from 1 to 9 million in the following year. And so I guess is it comical or inspiring? I don't know, but it is.
It's inspiring for sure. Are you kidding me?
It is.
I was crazy and, of just like fortunate timing.
Right.
And
it's a little comical. It's comical. The fact that you stood up there and said everyone's going to be remote in 10 years and then bam, shit happened literally next week. You must have felt like a savant.
Yeah, exactly.
Madam, you're the Madam Vidushka of remote work. You read the crystal ball.
Right.
Didn't you mean Aunt Cleo?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sondre, thank you so much for joining us, man. We could talk to you for a lot more, as you could tell. I appreciate your kindness with your time. Just real quick note, this person, they've raised over $40 million for funding another fully remote company. Thank you for doing this work. We need more remote companies getting funding. Sondre, can you please tell our listeners and viewers, where can we find you online if we want to learn more? Where can we find you?
Yeah, definitely go to safedoing.com if you're a nomad or remote team and you want to check out, insurance. We have a podcast called Building Remotely. It's a project where we're going to try to make a textbook on making a remote team. And on the way there, interviewing some remote leaders about how to do various things remotely. It's been a fun project. I've learned a lot. So, for deep dives, that's a place to take a look.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, sir. You're welcome back anytime. Thank you, Josh Morris. Tell everybody where they can find you, our guest host, insurance aficionado here. Where can people find you, Mr. Morris?
You can find me at www.withlayer.com. The company I work for is Layer. We're focused on commercial insurance, solving problems in the commercial insurance space. So close cousin to Sondre.
Awesome. Well, good stuff. Everyone, thank you all so much. We'll talk to you later. Peace.
You've been listening to the Remotely We Are One podcast. Visit us at remotelyone.com/podcast for upcoming episodes. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and download our episodes on your favorite podcast app.
Hey, don't forget to clock out.